Have you ever noticed how some people seem to build wealth almost systematically? Well, it's usually not luck. Today, we're going to break down the idea that financial freedom is something you can actually architect, design, and build, just like an engineer would build a high-performance machine. Let's get into the blueprint. This right here is the core idea for everything we're about to cover. See, building wealth isn't random. It's a system with distinct, interconnected parts. We're going to deconstruct this machine piece by piece, first defining the target, then building the engine, optimizing all the components, and even installing a turbocharger. You know, any great engineering project starts with exact specifications. You wouldn't try to build a bridge without knowing precisely how far it needs to stretch, right? The exact same logic applies to your finances. So, step one is to define your target with absolute clarity. Now, this is not about saving for retirement in some vague, far-off sense. This is about calculating a functional number. It's the total amount of capital you need invested so that the returns on those investments can pay for your entire life. This completely shifts the goal from just hoarding cash to building a cash flow generating machine. So how do you actually find this number? It's surprisingly simple. First, you figure out what your ideal annual expenses would be. You know, housing, food, travel, the whole shebang. Let's just say for this example, it's $75,000. A really solid rule of thumb is to multiply that number by 20. Now, this is based on the idea that you can safely withdraw about 5% from your investments each year without ever really touching the original principal. And just like that, an abstract goal becomes a concrete mathematical target. Okay, a number like that can feel pretty huge, I get it. But remember, this isn't about saving $1.5 million in cash under your mattress. It's about building an asset base of this value. The goal is to live off the income it produces, not drain the principal. Think of it like harvesting the fruit from a tree every year without ever cutting the tree down. So next up, let's talk about how to engineer the systems that get you there. All right, with our target locked in, we now need to build the engine that's going to power this whole wealth machine. This is all about generating the capital you need to invest and hit that freedom number. It's about creating cash flow that's both resilient and scalable. Now, there is a very clear, very logical sequence to building this income engine. It all starts with sales. That is the fundamental skill of understanding how to generate revenue. Next, you build an audience. Then, and only after that, do you diversify. And finally, you use paid ads to scale what you already know works. See, rushing into ads before your organic model is solid is one of the fastest ways to just burn through your cash. What's so powerful here is the way this reframes the idea of a social media audience. It's not a vanity metric, it is a strategic asset. When you own a distribution channel, you can market, educate, and sell day in and day out without having to pay for ads. This crushes your customer acquisition costs and gives you a massive, massive competitive advantage. So, building that income engine is really only half the battle. To accelerate your progress, you have to optimize the machine's efficiency. And that means strategically managing your biggest expenses to free up way more capital for investing. It's not about being cheap or cutting out joy. It's about systematically removing waste. When you actually look at where the money goes for most people, one category just jumps off the page. Housing. For most households, it is the single biggest expense. And that means it is also the single biggest lever you can possibly pull to optimize your entire financial system and create a surplus. And that brings us to an incredibly powerful strategy called house hacking. The mechanism is honestly brilliant. You buy a duplex or a triplex, you live in one of the units, and you rent out the others. Your tenant's rent money then pays down a huge chunk or sometimes even all of your mortgage. You are literally turning your biggest liability into an asset that builds equity and slashes your living costs. The reason this strategy works so well is because of leverage, a core principle of building wealth. With real estate, you can buy a big property with only a small percentage down. You get to control the entire asset, you benefit from all of its appreciation, and you have tenants paying down the debt for you, all while you've only put up a fraction of the total price. It's this unique combination that makes real estate such a powerful wealth-building tool. Okay, so we've defined our target, we've built the income engine, and we've optimized our lifestyle. Now, it's time to install a turbocharger. Advanced tax strategy isn't just about saving a little money. It's an offensive tool that creates huge amounts of surplus capital that you can then reinvest to accelerate your entire journey. One of the most powerful tax strategies out there involves what's known as the real estate professional or REP status. Now, to qualify, one spouse has to spend at least 750 hours a year and more than half of their working time on real estate activities. The benefit is just massive. It lets you use paper losses from real estate, like accelerated depreciation, which is a way to claim a property's loss in value as a big tax deduction up front to reduce your active income from a high-paying job or business. And this slide just illustrates the synergy perfectly. You have one spouse who focuses on earning high active income. The other spouse becomes the real estate professional, managing the property portfolio. Then, the losses from real estate, which, remember, are often just accounting tools like depreciation and aren't actual cash out of your pocket, are used to offset the first spouse's income. This legally craters your tax bill year after year, freeing up huge amounts of cash that you can then reinvest. And beyond that super advanced strategy, there are the foundational business deductions that every entrepreneur should be using. Things like startup costs, a home office deduction, vehicle expenses, marketing. These are all legitimate write-offs. Every single deduction allows you to hold on to more of your capital, which can then be put right back to work growing your assets. So we've basically deconstructed the entire machine. Now, let's just pull it all back together and summarize the key strategic levers, the actionable principles you can use to start engineering your own system. So, the key takeaway is this. These are the core components of your wealth machine. First, you need the blueprint. Define your target by calculating your specific freedom number. Second, you build the chassis. Engineer your lifestyle to create surplus capital, focusing on housing. Third, the financing. Use credit strategically to get access to leverage. Fourth, the engine. Stack resilient income streams. And finally, the operating system. You have to treat money not as something to be spent, but as a tool to be reinvested into assets that work for you. And this all brings us to a final, really important question to ask yourself. We spend our entire lives working so hard for our money. But how many of us have actually designed a system where our money is truly working hard for us, around the clock, even when we're asleep? And that right there is the ultimate mindset shift. The goal isn't just to work more hours. The goal is to build a system where your capital becomes your hardest working employee. That is the core idea behind an engineered approach to financial freedom.